Have you ever wondered why Virat Kohli is the best cricketer of our generation? Why MS Dhoni is so calm, so cool under the pressure and is the best match finisher of our generation? How and why Roger Federer, Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal have ruled the tennis world for past 2 decades? Friends, the real question is how this best of the best athletes have separated themselves from the mediocrity. To answer these questions, I am today joined by India's best sports scientist and performance coach, Mr. Shayamal Vallabhjee. Shayamal sir shares us his immensely valuable knowledge of 2 decades. Basically, today you will know what goes behind making of legendary athletes. Hope you find our conversation very valuable and do like, share and subscribe to the Dr. SMiT Show for more such content. So sir, you told that you have trained lots of athletes. So how do you approach a poor genetical composition athlete? Like for example in India, Virat Kohli has a really bad metabolism. You can see his 20 earlier years, means 2010 and 2011 years and now years. He has radically changed his whole approach from sports scientist perspective, and he is now from a performance standpoint, he is poles apart from what he was a decade back. So how do you approach a poor genetically composition of athlete's body?
So there's a big difference between a track and field event and a game. You know, Virat is playing a game. And when you're playing a game, you don't need to be in top physiological performance. You need to be above a certain threshold of fitness. You need to be able to, if you're playing a test match, be on your feet for 8 hours a day. If you're playing a 50 over, you need to be able to run at least 13 kilometers because that's the distance you'll cover. But you don't have to be able to be the fastest person to cover 13 kilometers. You just need to be able to manage it. Now, if you have a look at our Indian cricket team, just take different people, for example. You take a KL Rahul, you take a Virat Kohli, you take a Rohit Sharma, you take a Surya Kumar Yadav. These people have completely different body structures. They're completely different in age, in way their bodies, but they all are performing successfully at the exact same level. You understand? So this is an indication that whilst physiology is important, physiology does not make and break performance when it comes to games. Now, would a genetically poor athlete be able to win 100 meters in an Olympic Games? The answer is no. He wouldn't. Why? Because you need to be operating at the peak level of your physiology at that level to be able to win that. And there's an interesting piece of science, They say genetically, the 12 to 18 athletes that will line up for the 100-meter final in an Olympic Games are genetically closer to each other than you are to your siblings. That's how small the delta is for professional sport when you're looking at pure genetics and pure physiology.
Any athlete, if he comes to you, then what are the parameters you see and how do you improve on them? Like for example, let's take an example of a cricketer. He comes to you, then how's your approach to him?
Everything is completely different and is completely personalized. Every single thing. For example, if you take a cricketer who's a bowler, right? What you're optimizing is you're looking at his body structure, you're looking at his bowling technique. Is he front foot? Is he side on? Is he is he mixed feet placement? We're looking at that because that will determine which muscles are moving him forward. For example, a front on bowler, you can add a yard of pace on him by just increasing the speed of his run up. You can't do that with a side-on bowler because he has to transition, which means he has to slow down. That's why he jumps higher. So he needs more abdominal and more shoulder strength. So how you optimize performance in a person is not about the physiological markers, but it's about your understanding of the sport and the biomechanics of the sport. People often ask me, why is it that you only work with a few codes of sport? I only work with golf, I work with professional tennis players, with professional cricketers and marathon runners. I don't touch anyone else. Why is it that I do that? Because if you want to truly optimize performance, you need to know all of the rules in the rule book and need to understand the biomechanics of that sport. If you don't understand that, then you do not understand the ecosystem and the framework within which they're going to operate. Now, you're going to try to improve performance independent of their ecosystem where they need to operate. It can never work. It can never work. So the best in the world, the best sports scientists, the best sports medicine doctors will specialize in a particular code of sport. You'll see they've been with cricket for 20 years. They've been with football for 20. They don't jump from here to there. Even within the Olympics, they specialize in a particular event, the 400, the 200, in a certain swim stroke. Everything comes down to, it's a lifelong journey in mastering just one skill.
So my other question is that we talked about Virat Kohli. So what separates the elite from the mediocre talent, according to you, on an athletic performance basis?
The difference between great players and good players has nothing to do with physiology. It has everything to do with psychology, because Virat is not the fittest cricketer to walk a field. I can give you 1,000 cricketers who are fitter than him who would never come anywhere close to him, and the same with Usain Bolt. He's not the strongest runner, or he's not, physiologically the fittest, right? What is it that allows them to compete at that level? And you take tennis, you look at Roger, you look at Rafa, it's not their body, it's their mind. And what about their mind? It's their ability to remain calm at the height of pressure. That is the differentiator, because why? When the brain perceives pressure or stress in any shape and form, the first thing that does is the brain shuts down, right? You get what's called an amygdala attack. An amygdala attack stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, which increases your breath rate. It gets the body in a flight or fight mode and not in a rational thinking mode. Okay. Now, you need to be able to rationally perceive your options at the height of pressure to succeed. Right? But if your brain is shutting down, you got no chance. The person who performs the best is the person who's calmest at that moment. Yeah. So, for example, let me give you a really nice example. Very often we see, one of my dear friends is Lance Klusener, the cricketer. Lance Klusener used to finish cricket games off better than anyone else. I'm talking between 1998 and 2005, 2006. He was the best finisher in the game, right? Then Dhoni came on now. Dhoni took over from probably 2012 to about 2018. What was it that made Dhoni and Klusener the best finishers in the game? It was it was very simple. Dhoni and Klusener knew that no matter what the situation is in the last ball, no matter how many runs they needed to chase, they knew for a fact that the bowler was more scared than they were. They knew that. Right. So it would be a completely different story if the number tailender, if Glenn McGrath was facing the same situation against Jasprit Bumrah, Glenn McGrath would be there, right? So and what allows a person to know that? It's composure and confidence and success and practice and execution. All of these things amalgamate into that moment. But all of this amalgamation comes down into a state of calm. It's that state of calm that gives them an advantage.
I think while you were telling that, one incident arised on me. Then it was that 2019 Wimbledon's final between Novak Djokovic and Roger Federer. Roger was on the lead till the end stage of the game, but at the end, Djokovic turned the tables and he won the match. And after the match, he was interviewed and he told that the whole crowd was cheering Roger. And in my mind, I translated into that Novak. So like Novak Djokovic, Virat Kohli in this India-Pakistan match, and also basketball greats like Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, when the clutch moment arises, they switch into the other gear, what we call the flow state. So what are the practices you prescribe to such athletes so that in pressure situation they can calm down and they can gain control over their sympathetic system?
There are a few things that you need to get into flow state. The first thing you need to get into flow state is your body needs to be in peak physiological form. The reason why is that, if you look at these moments, if you look at the Roger Novak final in 2019, that was the longest Wimbledon final in the history. It was also the first final to be settled by a match tiebreaker, right? And Novak had to come back from 2 championship points down. Okay. Now, at that point, they'd already been on the court for 5 hours. Okay. When you look at Dhoni hitting that last ball, or Klusner hitting that last ball, or Bumrah bowling that last ball, he's already on the field for 3.5 hours. Sometimes 5 hours. He's already on the field, right? So the first criteria is peak physiological fitness, which means you need to be physically fit enough to execute that last ball skill at the same intensity as the first ball. That's peak fitness. The second thing is skill automation. Okay, you need to be able, you can't be thinking about how you execute skills. You need to have practiced that skill so much, right, that it is a part of the subconscious mind. Right, that's it. And the third thing is knowledge, right? You need to have thought about that situation so many times and looked at the multiple options in how people executed it. So someone wants to bowl at Dhoni to defend 4 runs off the last ball, needs to know every single ball that was bowled to him in that situation and how he played it. And what was the match? What was the size of the ground? Which end did they bowl it? What was the conditions? What's his favorite shot? What score was he on when he played that shot? All of these things, because when you have all of this knowledge, flow state is what? Flow state is the brain's ability to assimilate all of that knowledge into a single data point that you can execute with composure at the height of pressure. So these are the 3 variables that are needed for flow.
So talking about the other aspects like diet and all, so what study means, what's your observation between the veg, non-veg and vegans? We know that there is a ample number of research for the both sides, but as an athletic standpoint, what difference have you seen among these athletes?
You know, quite honestly, there's a phenomenal amount of research around both, you know, and they research that validate all sorts of things. You know, I've seen athletes being super successful on a pure carnivorous diet. I've seen people go vegan and be extremely successful. I've seen people just eat whatever they want to and be completely successful. You know, it's a very subtle science, and it's a subtle science that must bear in mind a few things. It must bear in mind the athlete's body. It must bear in mind the availability of food in their training environment. It must bear in mind the duration of their environment and how much they get a chance to consume this, all sorts of things like this. I don't advocate one particular diet. I have seen in a lot of my athletes removing gluten, removing lactose, going onto a more plant-based diet has reduced inflammation in their body. They're finding lighter and their bodies slim down, so they're able to perform better. Having said that, I have a lot of athletes who eat a lot of red meat, right, and are still performing successfully. The research is still not 100% clear on a particular diet for a particular code or sport is optimal. We've not seen that, and I don't think we will ever see that, because why? People's training environments and their physiology and all of this comes into play, and there's an entire plethora of factors that have to be considered into that. So I generally don't advocate a particular diet and such. But having said, like I said, you know, my runners do really well on plant-based diets. We're seeing a lot of tennis players now go into vegan plant-based diets. You know, as a general rule of thumb, the way I approach it is I look at the genetics of the body. I look at what are your genetic S&Ps and what is your body's ability to metabolize a certain form of food in a certain way. I layer on top of that your food allergies and your intolerances, so I don't want to trigger the body's anti-inflammatory response by giving you anything you're allergic to. So I remove all our allergies in that. And then I look at the duration of your training. I look at the duration of competition. I look at the training zone of training, the intensity of competition. I look at your average sleep, your average heart rate variability, your inflammation markers, and on the basis of some things like this, including other things like gut microbiome, we start prescribing diet in there. So as you can see, I've mentioned just a few of the variables I look into, but it's quite an in-depth science.
Sir, sir, we live in an age of increasing the longevity and prime age of the athletes, like in LeBron James or Novak Djokovic or even Virat Kohli. Even past the mid-30s, they are playing in the top condition. So this trend is only possible in the last a decade or two. So what has changed over the last 2 decades according to you as a sports scientist and the analyst? And what is the reason for increasing the prime of these athletes?
Well, firstly, that the athletes you're mentioning are all playing games. And statistically, we've seen that players who play games, whether you look at Wayne Gretzky, you look at LeBron, you look at everyone, they show a lot of promise and talent in the beginning, 18 to 22. The career kind of plateaus, and then they get really, really good towards the back end of the career, which is from about 28 to about 35. Right? That's their glory years, as we call it. We see this because their ability to assimilate their strengths from a skill point of view and remain calm with the ability to execute under pressure. So, games. You wouldn't see the same trend, for example, in track and field athletes. You know, you may see it in Eliud Kipchoge is really an outlier in this case where he's getting faster with years, but he's really, like I said, an outlier data point. You wouldn't see this trend in too many track and field events. You know, as they at the back end of the decade, they start getting slower as opposed to getting faster. But game athletes tend to perform a lot better at that. So at all times, it's really important for us to keep differentiating towards this. Are we looking at the sports science around performance in relation to a game, or are we looking at the sports science of performance in relation to a physiological track and field event that requires you to perform at the optimum, you know? And then even within this, the levels of nuance for it. For example, like I mentioned Eliud, for example, you know, Eliud is running, even if he runs a sub 2-hour marathon, he's not running flat out at any particular time, right? A Usain Bolt or a sprinter would be running flat out, which is why they can only last that long. So it comes in. So once you the closer you are to your peak, the slower you're going to get. So for example, if you go 100, you go 200. As they get older, they will slow down. But you'll find that the rate of slowing down, the rate of deceleration, right, as they get older, increases as the event gets longer. You know, if you understand. So it's a steep curve in short events. The curve is more gentle as the event gets longer. Because why? Because the gap between the floor and the ceiling for peak performances is a little smaller there at the longer event.
So after adding on that, I would like to say that what about the anti-aging tools that we have researched over the last few decades, like anti-aging tools like stem cell therapy and the rehab and injury recovery tools and all that. Have they contributed to the extended prime and all that?
The reason why, I mean, the athletes are playing for much longer, coming back to your first question, was they're playing because they're competing so much more. You know, now, for example, see, if you take let's go back a few decades, you look at a Dennis Lilly or a Jeff Thompson, they played 1-2 tours in a year, 3 tours maximum if you came from a big country. You know, you had 1 season, then you had 3 months off in the off season. There's no more 3 months off. So the sheer nature of the intensity at which they're competing and the frequency with which they're competing means that they're staying fitter for longer, right? So now, the current athlete doesn't have to focus so much on training, he has to focus more on recovery, right? And what is the best recovery tool? The best recovery tool on the planet is sleep, right? You can take everything, you can take all the supplements in the world. If you're not sleeping well, it's not going to work, right? So we're fundamentally looking at how can we optimize sleep. If an athlete is recovering well enough, everything else falls in place. If you're not recovering and not sleeping well, nothing else matters. So what's happening is the current athlete doesn't really, I mean, if you travel, I've spent some time on the IPL, I've spent some time with national teams traveling, we hardly spend any time in the gym. You wouldn't believe it. We travel for 3 months. I mean, you know, an average person would spend more time in a gym in 1 or 2 weeks than we spend over 3 months in that gym. Why? We're just on the field training, running, practicing. The fitness level is at such a high level, we don't need to go into the gym at all. You know, but we need to spend time recovering. So for example, the more time now, if you look from a recovery point of view, the time a professional athlete spends on recovery in 1 week, most people wouldn't spend on recovery in an entire year. That's the difference.
Got it. Preparing for this interview, one of my friend and many friends recommended this question to you. The question was, there are many gym aversive people. They like playing sports, but they don't want to go to gym and build the body and like that. I personally have been playing tennis for last 15 years. So what's your take on that? Can a person be fit and healthy just by playing a sport, or he necessarily needs to hop into a gym and build specific muscles up?
You know, you need strength for everything, and your strength, even with professionals, is supplementing your performance on the court. So yes, you can play. If you're an average person, wants to play football 3 times a week, play tennis 3 times a week, you can be a player. You'll play, you may win a few games here and there. Are you going to get better? The answer is no. You're not going to get better. You'll learn over a period of time. You'll see a gentle curve in your performance improving. But that's not you getting fitter. That's you just understanding how to play the game and execute skills better. Right? But if you start going to the gym once a week or twice a week for 30 minutes, you'll see a significant jump in your performance. Because why? You're getting faster, you're getting stronger. So how will that translate? In tennis, you'll find that you have more core control in how you execute a shot. You'll find you're getting more forward momentum in your stroke. So there's more power between the ball. You'll be able to hit the ball better. You're finding that the reverb on your racket, your forearm grip strength is stronger, so you're able to maintain the control of the racket face on the ball a little bit better. These will come in with strength. Now, this will never come in if you just keep playing over and over. So, if someone is investing time in playing a particular sport, whether you're an amateur or a novice or a pro or whatever, investing time in the prerequisites of strength and flexibility to improve that performance is a no-brainer.
So my last question for you is that what are the top 5 or 7 toolkits you will recommend a common man as a holistic health standpoint, like sleep, diet, or any kind of training you would suggest us?
Yeah, I mean, the main things I would tell people is obviously make sure that you're getting a good night's sleep. That's very, very important. The second thing I would say is make sure that you are you're spending enough time in nature. This is very, very important. Right, spending time in nature, spending time barefoot. I would recommend, investing a little bit of time in understanding what's the optimal diet for you. So, is it more plant-based? This thing, I would recommend getting a once a week detox in there. So either an intermittent fasting once a week or a 24-hour fast to detoxify the body. Understand when you're going to give that digestive system a break. These are the simple low-hanging fruit that will really give anyone. And then the last one is bring a little bit of strength in.
Friends, I hope you learned something valuable today. For more such content, like, share and subscribe to the Dr. Smith Show. See you next time.